The wind on the upper deck of the Washington State Ferry always carried a bite, even in late summer, but that evening I barely felt the cold. All I wanted was to reach the railing before the sun slipped completely behind the horizon. The sky was turning the shade of gold that always made my chest ache with a feeling I had no name for a longing older than memory itself. I pushed my wheelchair forward, careful over the narrow grooves of the metal floor, but halfway across the deck, the right wheel caught on something. The chair jerked so hard I slammed my palms against the armrests to steady myself. I tried again, adjusting my angle, but the wheel refused to budge. Before I could lean forward to check, a sharp voice cut through the wind. "Look at this! She is blocking the entire view." A group of teenagers stood several feet away, jackets unzipped, hair whipping in the breeze. They were not speaking quietly. One of them nudged another with an elbow. "This is why they should not let people like her crowd the deck during sunset." My stomach clenched. People like her. I had heard variations of that phrase all year, ever since the accident, every time it hit in a new place. I forced my fingers to stay steady on the rims. "I just need to get to the railing," I said calmly, mostly to myself. One of the boys mimicked my tone in a high-pitched whisper, earning laughter from the others. Before I could respond, a ferry attendant stepped outside. "What is going on here?" His tone was brisk and patient. One of the teens pointed straight at me. "She is causing a backup." The attendant walked toward me with a sigh that made heat crawl up my neck. "Miss, you cannot block the deck like this. If you are having difficulty controlling your chair, you should stay inside." My breath stuttered in my throat. "I am not blocking anything. My wheel is stuck." He folded his arms and shook his head as if he had heard excuses like this 1,000 times. "Well, please clear this main path. Other passengers need to walk through." Behind him, the teenagers snickered. Something inside me shrank. I reached into my coat pocket and closed my hand around the small brass compass my mother had given me years earlier. The metal was warm from my body heat. I pressed my thumb over the faded engraving on the lid. It steadied me the way it always had. I looked up at the sky again, determined not to cry. I just wished I could see it the way I used to. But before I could gather myself enough to maneuver the chair again, one of the teens muttered, "She should stay home if she cannot handle a simple ride." That did it. The words sliced deeper than they had any right to. I felt humiliation rise hot and fast, crawling up my throat. The attendant opened his mouth again, but another voice spoke from behind me. "That is enough." Everything froze. The wind, the laughter, even my breath. I turned my head and saw a man step into view. Tall, composed, wearing a charcoal coat that looked far too expensive for a ferry ride. His presence was not loud, but it shifted the entire atmosphere of the deck. The teenagers fell silent. The attendant straightened. The man's eyes were steady calm, but unmistakably firm. "Let her be," he said. His voice carried a quiet authority that did not need volume. The group dispersed without a word. Even the attendant mumbled something and backed away toward the door. It left me alone with the stranger who had spoken for me. He did not approach right away. He stood a few feet back, hands loosely at his sides, as if giving me space to decide whether to acknowledge him. When our eyes finally met, he asked with a tone I had almost forgotten existed, one that held no pity, only respect. "What do you need?" The question was so simple it startled me. My throat tightened. I lifted the compass slightly, not sure why. "I want to see the sky," I whispered. "Really see it." "The railing is too high from where I sit." He nodded once in understanding. "May I help you?" I nodded. He moved slowly, deliberately, circling behind my chair. He crouched down to examine the stuck wheel without touching me or the chair. "Your wheel is wedged in a groove," he said. "I can lift the chair free if that is all right with you." "Yes," I breathed. "Please." He freed the wheel with one firm lift, then asked another question. "There is a tall viewing seat bolted to the deck near the railing. If you are comfortable, I can help you up onto it. You will be safe and at eye level with the horizon." I felt something flutter in my chest, something like hope. "Yes, please." Carefully checking with me at every step, he supported my weight and lifted me onto the tall, secure seat. Once seated, I felt the world open. The sky exploded into view, orange melting into rose, into lavender, into the first brave stars piercing through dusk. I gasped. The sound escaped me before I could stop it. I had not seen the sky like this since the night before the accident. The man stood beside me, hands at his sides, again watching the horizon instead of watching me. And in that moment, as the light shifted across the water and the brass compass warmed in my palm, something in my chest shifted as well. And something in his eyes softened just enough for me to notice. For a long moment after he helped me onto the tall viewing seat, neither of us spoke. The sun had slipped lower, settling into a soft copper glow that shimmered across the water. The deck had quieted the rude boys long gone, the ferry attendant nowhere in sight. Only the hum of the engine and the distant cry of gulls broke the stillness. The man stood a few feet away, giving me space. His gaze directed toward the horizon like he was trying to memorize something he had forgotten years ago. I studied him from the corner of my eye. His posture was upright but not rigid, his hands resting loosely in the pockets of his coat. There was a heaviness to him that did not come from anger, but from exhaustion, the kind that settles into someone who has carried too much for too long. I cleared my throat gently. "Thank you," I said. He turned toward me, meeting my eyes with an expression that was attentive but not intrusive. "You do not need to thank me," he answered. What happened was wrong. His voice was low, steady, almost unnervingly calm for someone who had just confronted a group of teenagers and a ferry employee. I wrapped my fingers around the compass in my lap. It felt lighter now, less like an anchor, and more like a reminder. I glanced at him again. "What brings you on the ferry at sunset? Most people avoid the cold." He hesitated, his jaw shifting slightly as if he were sorting through words. Finally, he said, "Trying to remember what peace feels like." Something in the way he said it made my breath pause. Not dramatic, not poetic, just honest. The kind of honesty that slips out only when someone is too tired to contain it. I nodded slowly. "I know that feeling." His eyes flicked to me with a quiet curiosity. "Do you?" I exhaled softly. This is the first time I have been outside at sunset since the accident. The word hung there small but heavy. I waited for the familiar reactions. Awkward sympathy, a rushed apology, a look of pity. But Rowan Hale, though I did not yet know his name, only nodded once, the gesture subtle and respectful. "I am glad you came anyway," he said. The wind shifted. My hair blew across my face, and I tucked it behind my ear. I reached for the compass again, my fingers tracing the worn edges. Its lid caught the dying sunlight flashing briefly. His gaze followed the motion. "May I ask what that is?" I hesitated. "A compass," I replied, holding it up. "My mother gave it to me years ago." He stepped a little closer, not enough to crowd me, just enough to see the engraving. "Does it still point north?" I gave a soft, almost bitter laugh. "It used to." He studied me for a moment, not trying to interpret more than I offered. "Sometimes that happens," he said gently. "North changes when life changes." His words caught me off guard. Most people tried to reassure me that nothing had changed, that life was the same if I learned to adapt. But this man acknowledged what everyone else tried to deny. The sky shifted again, and for a long moment we simply watched it. Waves slapped gently against the ferry hull. I felt a strange sense of ease near him, something I had not felt with a stranger in a long time. He did not demand anything from me. He did not fill the space with unnecessary chatter. He simply existed beside me, steady and quiet, like a person who understood silence was not emptiness. After a while, he asked softly, "Were you trying to see the sky before?" I nodded. I used to study it. The stars, the constellations, the way the light changes with the seasons. Then everything changed, thing. He did not press for details. Instead, he said, "The sky looks different when you need it to remind you of something, or someone." His voice dipped on the last word. For the first time since meeting him, I let myself look directly at him. There was something in his expression, something achingly familiar, a shadow of grief, a bruise that had not faded. I recognized it because I lived with my own version of it every day. Loss makes the world feel tilted, I said quietly. Like you are walking at an angle and no one else notices. His lips curved slightly, not into a smile, but something close to understanding. Yes, he murmured. Exactly like that. A gull flew low across the water, catching our attention at the same time. He glanced at the wheelchair parked behind the viewing seat. May I sit near you? The question surprised me, not because he asked to sit, but because he asked permission. Of course, I said. He chose a spot at a polite distance, leaning against the railing, but angled enough that he could still see me if he looked. I did not know why, but the gesture felt grounding, like he wanted to be present without intruding. What is your name? He asked after a moment. Alara, I replied. And yours. Rowan. Rowan Hale. The name landed with a weight I could not explain. I let it settle between us. Rowan tilted his head slightly, studying the sky again. When was the last time you watched a sunset like this? I swallowed. Before everything. His eyes softened. I do not know your story, he said, but whatever it is, you made it to this moment. That counts for something. I blinked hard, surprised by the sting behind my eyes. It had been a long time since someone spoke to me as if my survival was not a burden but an achievement. The ferry horn bellowed, echoing across the water as the sun finally dipped out of sight. The last light brushed Rowan's face, and I thought strangely that he looked like someone who had been running for years and had finally stopped long enough to breathe. In the fading glow, we sat together, two strangers who did not want to be seen by the world, yet somehow saw each other anyway. The ferry ride neared its end, the last streaks of sunset fading into a cooler indigo as lights from the approaching harbor flickered across the water. I thought the conversation between Rowan and me might settle into silence again, the comfortable kind that had formed between us, but instead he glanced at the sketchbook resting on my lap. May I ask what you draw? His tone was careful, as though he knew there were places a person's grief could hide and did not want to step on any of them. I hesitated, then opened the book to a half-finished page. The lines were soft, tentative, as if I had been afraid the paper might reject my touch. This was supposed to be Cassiopeia, I murmured. Before the accident, I could draw the entire night sky from memory. Now the stars feel like strangers. Rowan studied the page with a focus that made me shift slightly, the way someone might if a stranger leaned in too close. But he did not feel like a stranger anymore, not exactly. After a long moment, he whispered, You draw like someone who remembers how the sky felt, not just how it looked. The words hit somewhere deep. I had never told anyone that my drawings were built on emotion rather than precision. My instructors used to say I drew constellations like they were living things. I closed the sketchbook slowly. Maybe that is why it has been so hard. Feelings change. Yes, Rowan said quietly. They do. He straightened, leaning his elbows lightly on the railing. When my father died, the sky changed for me too. His voice was steady but thinner now, like a string pulled too tight. We were in the middle of a board meeting. My assistant came in with this look on her face. He paused, looking past the horizon to something I could not see. I remember thinking the sky outside the window looked strange, too still, too quiet. It felt like the world had shifted half an inch and would never go back. I felt a heaviness spread through my chest, not from pity, but recognition. Grief had a way of making strangers feel like mirrors. I am sorry, I whispered. He nodded without looking at me. I tried to go back to work the next day. Everyone praised me for my dedication, but all I felt was numb. He exhaled sharply, almost a laugh. Funny how the world rewards you for pretending you are fine. I tightened my grip on the compass. After my mom passed, people told me I was strong. They had no idea strength was the last thing I felt. He turned his head, then studying me with an expression that made my pulse shift. What did your mother give you the compass for? I looked down at it in my palm. She said it would remind me that no matter what happens, I could always find my way back to myself. My throat tightened. But when the accident happened, when I lost the use of my legs, when she died before she ever saw me get back on my feet metaphorically or otherwise, it felt like the compass lost its north. Rowan's eyes softened so slowly it was like watching ice melt 1 degree at a time. May I see it? The request surprised me, but I nodded. He stepped closer, his hands cupped gently as if expecting something fragile. I placed the compass in his palms. He held it with a reverence that made my breath catch. The metal glowed faintly under the fairy lights. "This means something to you?" he murmured. "A great deal." He nodded once as though committing that truth to memory. Then he offered it back to me, but not before saying, "Maybe the compass did not lose its north. Maybe you just stopped believing you deserved to follow it." The words hit me so hard I had to look away. The wind picked up, brushing against my cheeks like a cold hand. I blinked quickly, not wanting him to notice the wetness gathering in my eyes. Rowan did not comment. Instead, he lifted his gaze to the sky again. The first stars appeared tiny but determined. "You know," he said softly, "I used to think stars looked brightest from childhood windows. But now I think they shine brightest when someone needs them to remind them they are still alive." His voice had shifted again into something gentle, something that reached without touching. I swallowed. "You talk like someone who sees things people usually miss." He smiled faintly. "Or maybe I just see the things I ignored for too long." The fairy horn sounded again, closer now. Passengers began drifting toward the doors, gathering their bags, preparing for the return to land. I expected Rowan to step away to rejoin whatever world he came from, but he stayed beside me, watching the crowd move around us. "Do you ever feel," I said quietly, "that everyone else knows where they are going except you?" "All the time," he replied. "Some people just hide it better." A small laugh escaped me. It was the first real laugh I had allowed myself in months. Rowan looked at me with a softness that made my pulse skip. "You laugh?" he said, "like you are remembering how to breathe." The words settled in my chest like something warm. I glanced at the approaching dock. The sky above it glowed with the last remnants of dusk. I did not want this moment to end. Rowan seemed to sense it. He said nothing more, but his presence was steady beside me like a promise neither of us dared name. As the ferry slowed to meet the pier, he tilted his head and asked one more quiet question. "Alara, would you show me more of your drawings someday?" And the surprising part was how easily the answer slipped out of me, unguarded and real. "I would like that. Very much." The ferry groaned as it met the dock, the metal grinding softly against the bumpers as the deckhands secured the ropes. People surged toward the exits, their voices rising in a muddled chorus of impatience, relief, and routine. Rowan and I lingered near the railing, letting the rush pass us by. I watched the water ripple under the shifting lights, the fading sky reflected in trembling shards. Something inside me felt just as fragile. Rowan glanced at me as though sensing the shift. "Are you all right?" I nodded, though the truth was I could feel a knot of unease tightening in my stomach. Being helped, being seen, being noticed at all still felt like standing too close to an open flame. The final gate lowered with a loud clang, jolting the deck. The sudden vibration rattled my chair, and my body instinctively tensed. Rowan moved slightly closer, but said nothing, letting me choose whether to reach for calm or retreat. When the crowd thinned, he gestured toward the exit. "May I walk with you?" The question was gentle, and something in his tone eased the knot a little. "Yes," I said. "I would like that." We moved slowly toward the ramp. My wheels glided smoothly across the steel surface until the wind shifted again. The gust was sharp, tugging at my scarf, whipping Rowan's coat and carrying the cold bite of open water. The ferry rocked just enough to throw me off balance. My chair rolled half an inch sideways. It should have been nothing. A tiny movement. A bump. But it hit me like a memory. The night of the accident. The sudden tilt. The feeling of falling with nothing beneath me. My breath caught sharp and panicked. I froze. Rowan noticed instantly. "Alara, you are all right." His voice anchored me for a moment. But then another gust hit stronger this time, and the ferry lurched just enough that my back wheel slipped into one of the narrow grooves on the deck. The chair jerked violently. My stomach dropped. I grabbed the armrests hard, my pulse surging. "I am falling. I am falling again." Rowan stepped forward immediately. "May I?" The word barely reached me. I could not breathe deeply enough to answer. But my silence must have been enough because he approached with slow, deliberate movements, crouching low, keeping his hands visible so I would not feel startled. "I am not touching you yet," he said softly. "I am only holding the chair steady." His fingers curled around the frame firm but careful. The chair stopped shaking. The deck beneath us vibrated with the final adjustments of the docking process, but Rowan's grip turned the chaos into something contained. "You are safe," he whispered. "I am right here." The words hit somewhere deep, bypassing thought and landing straight in the place where fear lived. My lungs opened just enough for air to slip in. The panic loosened. Not gone, just loosened. "Keep looking at me," he said gently. The wind howled again, but his voice stayed steady, warm, grounding. My grip on the armrests eased slightly. "I am going to lift the wheel out of the groove," Rowan continued. "Only the wheel, not you. Is that all right?" I swallowed hard. "Yes." He worked with slow precision, never rushing, never startling me. When the wheel finally came free, the chair settled back on even ground, but my body still trembled with the remnants of fear. Rowan stayed crouched beside me eye level, his hands resting loosely on his knees so I would not feel trapped. "Alara," he said softly, "you did not fall. You are safe." His calmness contrasted so sharply with the storm inside me that it made my throat burn. I blinked, trying to steady myself, but my vision shimmered. I hated how quickly fear could take over, how fragile it made me feel. I tried to laugh it off, but the sound cracked halfway out. "I am sorry," I whispered. "I do not usually panic like that." Rowan shook his head. "You do not owe me an apology for fear. You survived something life-changing. Your body remembers even when you want it to forget." The truth of that hit harder than the fear itself. My eyes stung. I looked away, quickly embarrassed by the sudden emotion. Rowan did not try to force eye contact. He simply shifted so he sat on the deck beside the chair, keeping near but not crowding me. A silent offer. A presence instead of pressure. After a long moment, I whispered, "I hate that it still controls me." Rowan rested his arms on his knees. "Fear does not mean you are weak, Alara. It means you are human." His voice had a softness I had not heard before, a softness that seemed reserved for moments no one else witnessed. I exhaled shakily. The last of the panic drained out of me, leaving a hollow ache in its place. Rowan waited until my breath steadied before he stood again, offering a small nod. "Whenever you are ready, we can head down the ramp. No rush." The phrase "no rush" felt like a kindness I had not been offered in a long time. I nodded. "Thank you, Rowan." "Truly." He gave a faint smile, one that barely touched his lips but warmed his eyes. "You do not need to thank me for staying. That is what people should do." With the fear fading and the dock finally steady beneath us, I felt something unexpected rise in my chest. Trust. Small, fragile, but real. The ramp was crowded with people eager to get off the ferry, but Rowan and I waited until the flow thinned. My wheels creaked softly as I started forward, the metal surface gently sloping downward toward the terminal. For a few peaceful seconds, everything felt manageable. Then the ramp's lower section appeared sharper than I expected, steeper than it looked from above. I tried to angle my chair carefully, but the front wheel snagged on a raised bolt. The sudden halt jolted my body forward. A couple walking past glanced at me, then at the obstruction, then kept going without slowing down. Another man muttered something under his breath about people needing to move faster. The familiar sting of embarrassment rose hot in my throat. My hands tightened on the wheels. I nudged forward again. The bolt held the wheel hostage like it refused to let me pass. I could feel the pressure of onlookers stacking behind me, impatience growing like heat on the back of my neck. Rowan stepped quietly to my right, close enough that I could feel his presence, far enough that he did not impose. "Do you want help, Alara?" The way he phrased it mattered. Not an order, not a pity-filled question, a choice. I hesitated, pride and fear wrestling inside me. "I can get it," I murmured. I tried again. The wheel jerked. My chest tightened. The couple behind us sighed loudly. One whispered, "This is why these ramps need attendants." My spine stiffened. Shame crawled up my neck. Rowan did not look at them. He kept his eyes on me and asked quiet and steady, "May I help you this time?" The knot inside me loosened slightly. "Yes," I whispered. "Please." Rowan knelt, adjusted the angle of the chair with gentle precision, and lifted the wheel just enough to clear the bolt. The movement was seamless, respectful. Not a show. Not a rescue meant to humiliate. Just help. Real help. The ramp finally opened into the terminal walkway, but I did not move. For a brief moment, I just sat there, breathing carefully, trying to gather all the pieces of myself scattered by embarrassment. Rowan stood slowly, waiting for me to look up before he spoke. "You did the hard part, Alara. I only helped with the bolt." His reframing landed deeper than he probably intended. It made shame loosen its grip. I exhaled, letting the air carry away some of the tension. "Thank you," I said softly. That was not nothing. We moved into the terminal where the warm lighting felt softer, forgiving. Families hurried past us, people wheeling luggage, conversations echoing off the high ceiling. Life moved on indifferent to my moment of struggle. Rowan walked beside me, matching my pace. No hurry, no impatience. When we reached the exit doors, I paused again. The night air was cold, tasting faintly of salt and pine. Cars lined up along the pickup lane, headlights cutting bright lines across the pavement. Rowan adjusted his coat collar against the wind. "Are you heading somewhere specific?" I hesitated. "I rented a small room a few blocks away. There is a hill, though, a steep one." Rowan nodded in understanding. Washington hills were unforgiving. Silence stretched between us, comfortable but charged. Then he asked with surprising gentleness, "May I give you a ride?" The question floated in the crisp air, simple yet loaded with meaning. Not romantic, not intrusive, practical, safe. It was the kind of offer Americans deeply familiar with boundaries knew how to appreciate. "Only if you are comfortable," he added quickly. "If not, that is perfectly all right." His respect made the decision feel like mine, not a concession to weakness. I thought about the hill, about my aching shoulders, about how long this day had been emotionally, physically, and everything in between. And I thought about Rowan taking 2 steps back earlier when I panicked, giving me space instead of swallowing it. Comfort. That was the final tipping point. I nodded. Yes. A slow breath left me surprising even myself. "Yes, Rowan. I would like that." His eyes softened just a fraction. "All right. My car is just over there." He pointed to a dark green SUV parked neatly at the edge of the lot. He walked beside me, not ahead, not behind. It gave me time to name what I was feeling. Not dependence, not vulnerability, something quieter. The wish to prolong a connection I had not expected to form. A wish to not end this moment yet. When we reached the car, Rowan opened the passenger door and stepped aside. "May I help you transfer?" he asked. No assumptions. No reaching without permission. "Yes, thank you." I braced my hands, shifted carefully, and slid onto the seat. Rowan secured my chair in the back with the kind of deliberate attentiveness that said he had learned to treat fragile things with steady hands. When he finally sat in the driver's seat, he looked over with a question in his eyes, checking if I was settled. "Ready." I nodded again. "Ready." As the car pulled away from the ferry terminal, Seattle's lights shimmered across the water behind us. Something quiet filled the space between us, vast but gentle, like the tide rolling in. This was the choice, not a dramatic one, not a cinematic one, a human one. He could have walked away. I could have refused. But we did not. We both stayed. And somewhere inside that small decision, a spark moved, subtle but alive. Rowan pushed open the door of the little tea room beside the ferry terminal, and a warm, amber glow washed over us, as if someone had lowered the world into soft light. The chatter inside was muted, just a few quiet conversations and the gentle clink of ceramic cups. The air smelled of cinnamon and bergamot and the faint sweetness of baked bread. He held the door until I rolled through, and even though he stood a few steps away, I felt strangely aware of him, as if the space shifted to make room for both of us. We chose a table by the window where strands of late afternoon light spilled across the wooden surface in long gold ribbons. Rowan sat across from me, his posture perfectly straight, but not stiff, more like a man who had spent years carrying the weight of things he never talked about. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence did not push or demand anything. It simply existed like a soft place to land after too many sharp edges. When the server came by, Rowan looked at me first as if to make sure I chose without feeling rushed. I ordered a lavender green tea. He asked for an Assam black. His voice was low and even, but I noticed the way his fingers tapped the side of his cup. Once the server walked away, as if he were trying to settle something restless inside himself. I rested my hands loosely in my lap, tracing the familiar worn edge of my mother's compass with one thumb. Being around him made me feel as if I should be careful, not because he frightened me, but because he felt rare. Like a quiet moment you did not want to break by breathing too loudly. When our teas arrived, the cups were placed just a little too far from my reach. Rowan watched me lean forward instinctively, then without hesitation he reached out and turned the cup gently, sliding it closer with a slow, deliberate motion. He did not make a show of helping. He did not comment on it. He simply made the world a little easier without drawing attention to what he had done. Something inside me loosened. I let out a small breath and he caught it, lifting his eyes to mine. "You laugh like someone remembering how to breathe," he said softly when he saw the faint smile tug at my lips. I shook my head. Was that a laugh? It felt more like a sigh trying on a new outfit. His mouth curved almost a smile, but not quite. Maybe that is where all new laughs begin. My fingers brushed the warm ceramic of the cup and the heat seeped into my palms, grounding me. I did not know what to do with the quiet between us. It was not awkward. It was not heavy. It felt like the kind of silence that reveals rather than hides. I sipped my tea. Lavender bloomed across my tongue, sweet and calm. Rowan watched me, not intensely, not intrusively, but with an attention that made it seem as though he had nowhere else to be. I asked him how often he escaped to places like this. His gaze drifted to the window for a moment, then back to me. "This is the first time in a long while," he said. "My life is full of rooms that echo, meetings, offices, stages, but nothing soft, nothing quiet." I tilted my head. "And you came here today for quiet?" He nodded once. "And maybe for something I did not know I needed." I felt a warmth rise in my chest, subtle but insistent, the kind that comes when someone sees you without trying to. We talked about the sky then. Not the scientific details or the constellations I used to study, but the feeling of it. How vastness can be both terrifying and comforting. How sometimes looking up is the only way to remember that you exist beyond your own smallness. He asked if the sky still mattered to me. I told him the truth. I want it to, but some days it feels like it is too far above me now. Rowan leaned forward, a little elbows resting lightly on the table. "What if it is not above you? What if you are just learning a new way to reach it?" His words rested in the air between us, warm in a way that startled me. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw something I had missed before. Beneath his calm exterior, beneath his careful movements and measured breaths, there was loneliness. Familiar loneliness. The kind that wears a suit and speaks in steady tones but still aches in quiet places. Maybe that was why being here with him felt strangely natural. We were two people who had lost different things but felt the absence in similar ways. Rowan sipped his tea and watched the steam rise. "Do you ever feel," he began, then paused as if choosing his words, "that your life has become something you perform rather than something you live?" I blinked, more often than I admit. He nodded in that slow, thoughtful way he had. "Me too." A gust of wind pressed against the window, rattling the glass gently. The light shifted. Outside, the sky had begun to deepen into shades of pale violet. I felt the window's coolness on my arm as I shifted slightly in my chair. Rowan looked at my hands again, noticing the compass. "May I see it?" His question was soft, cautious. I nodded and placed it on the table. He picked it up carefully as if it were fragile. "Does it still point north?" "Sometimes," I said, "and sometimes it spins. Maybe it is waiting for you to steady it. Or maybe it is waiting for me to steady myself." He did not correct me, did not offer shallow comfort. He simply nodded once as if he believed I would. The tea room grew quieter as the evening crowd faded. The world felt smaller in the best way, reduced to the amber glow on the table, the soft warmth of my tea, and Rowan's eyes across from me, reflecting something I had forgotten how to name. When it was time to leave, he stood first and held the door again. The cold air outside met my skin, but it no longer felt as sharp. Quiet intimacy, I realized, is not about closeness. It is about presence, and Rowan Hale was present in a way that made the world seem a little less heavy. When we left the tea room, the sky above the waterfront had deepened into indigo, the kind that folds slowly into night with a quiet exhale. Streetlights flickered on, one by one, lining the brick walkways in soft amber dots. Rowan walked beside me, not too close, not too far, matching his pace with the rhythm of my wheels, as though he had been doing it for years. The cool air brushed against my cheeks and carried the distant scent of cedar and ocean salt. For a moment, nothing hurt. I had forgotten what that felt like. As we reached the incline that curved toward the parking area, the pavements glistened with a thin sheen of moisture from the earlier mist. I noticed it, but dismissed it. I had crossed this same slope hundreds of times in other cities. I told myself I could handle it, but the moment my front wheel hit the damp stone, everything shifted. The wheel slipped sideways, catching on a groove in the pavement. Before I could react, the chair lurched sharply to the left, my balance tipping with it. A rush of panic shot through my body, cold and electric. The old fear rising so quickly, my breath broke. I grabbed at the armrest, but my hands trembled. The world tilted. The ground seemed to reach for me. Then Rowan's voice broke through the rising static in my head. Ilara. I felt his hands catch the armrest in the back of my chair with a steadiness I did not have. His grip was firm but gentle, grounding me. The chair rocked once more before settling. My chest heaved, my throat tightened. For a long moment I could not breathe. His knees bent so he could come down to my level, and he looked directly into my eyes. You are safe. You are safe, Ilara. I heard the words, but my body did not believe them yet. The memory of cold asphalt, the sound of sirens, the weight of people rushing toward me, the sudden stillness of my legs. All of it slammed back into me in a single crushing wave, and I felt it rising, swallowing the edges of my composure. My fingers clenched the rim of the wheel, my knuckles white. I hated this feeling. The vulnerability that came without warning, the loss of control, the way any moment could turn into a reminder of what I no longer had. I tried to swallow the burn in my throat, but it only made the pressure worse. Rowan's voice softened even more. Ilara, look at me. I forced my gaze upward. His expression was not pity. It was not fear. It was something steadier, deeper, almost protective. His hands were still on the chair, his thumbs lightly bracing the sides as though he were ready to stop the world from moving if he had to. You do not have to hold it in, he said. His words were quiet but firm, like someone offering truth rather than comfort. The breath I had been holding broke free in a shaky rush, and suddenly the tears came uninvited and angry. I turned my face away, ashamed of how quickly I had fallen apart. I am sorry, I whispered, though I could barely hear myself. I did not want him to see me like this. Not him. Not now. Rowan shifted closer, not invading, but anchoring. Do not apologize for being human. The burden is not you. It is everything life has made you carry alone. That undid me completely. My hands shook uncontrollably. My shoulders trembled. The world blurred as tears spilled hot and relentless from the corners of my eyes. I pressed a hand to my forehead, trying to steady myself, but my breath kept breaking. Rowan did not interrupt. He did not rush. He did not fill the silence with empty reassurances. Instead, he moved into a seated position right on the damp pavement, grounding himself beside me so I would not feel above or below him. He remained there steady and patient, letting me unravel without judgment. The storm inside me surged again. I hate this, I choked out. I hate needing help. I hate that one slip can undo everything. His eyes softened with something that felt like recognition, not sympathy. Needing help does not diminish you. Falling does not define you. Getting back up does. My breath stuttered. What if I cannot get back up? Then I will sit with you until you can. The words were simple but devastating in their sincerity. Something in my chest loosened enough for air to come back in small, shaky breaths. He reached out and hesitated for a brief second, giving me time to refuse. When I did not pull away, he placed his hand gently over mine where it clutched the wheel. The warmth of his touch anchored me, drawing me out of the spiral piece by piece. The wind quieted. The slope no longer seemed so steep. The world stopped tilting. After several long moments, my breathing slowed. My tears softened. The weight on my chest eased just enough for me to feel human again. Rowan stayed where he was, his hand still covering mine. When I finally looked at him, his expression held no frustration, no irritation, no fear of my fragility, only presence. Steady, patient presence. I let out a long breath, one that felt like it came from someplace deep and tired. "Thank you," I whispered. His reply was immediate quiet, but sure. Any time. It was the gentlest moment I had shared with anyone in years, and it terrified me because of how much it mattered. The morning after the fall, I woke to a thin veil of sunlight stretching across my ceiling, soft enough that it did not feel intrusive. My body still carried the heaviness of the night before, but lighter somehow, as though something inside me had been unclenched by Rowan's presence. I moved through my morning routine, slowly letting the quiet settle around me like a warm blanket. When I wheeled onto the balcony overlooking the small coastal path, the air was crisp, smelling faintly of pine and seawater. I breathed in deeply. For the first time in a while, it did not hurt to feel the world instead of hiding from it. My phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "If you are up for a small outing today, let me know. I promise it will not involve slippery hills." Rowan. I stared at the screen, the hint of a smile touching the corner of my mouth like something testing its own existence. He had left the choice completely to me, no pressure, no expectation. After last night's breakdown, some part of me expected distance, but instead he offered presence with gentle boundaries. My fingers hovered over the keypad before I typed back a simple yes. An hour later, he arrived leaning against a charcoal gray SUV with his hands in his pockets. He straightened when he saw me, and something flickered across his expression, a brief but unmistakable softening. Not pity. Recognition. He helped me into the car with quiet attentiveness, letting me guide the process while he filled in the gaps without making a production of it. Once we were on the road, the sky widened around us as the coastline curved along rocky edges. I watched the treetops sway patches of sunlight slipping between branches like shy visitors. Rowan did not talk much at first, and I appreciated that. Silence with him never felt empty. After 20 minutes, he turned onto a narrow gravel road marked by a small wooden sign. Beacon Ridge Overlook. I blinked. That place was known for having one of the highest publicly accessible viewpoints in the region, but it was notoriously unfriendly for wheelchairs. Rowan looked at me with a calm confidence that steadied my breath. "I made a call this morning. They built a temporary path extension for today. And no, before you worry, I asked for guidance from the ranger station and confirmed it meets ADA safety standards." I stared at him. "You did all of that this morning?" His shoulders lifted in a modest half shrug. "I thought it might matter to you." Matter was an understatement. It felt like someone had taken a part of myself I believed I had lost and handed it back with both hands. He drove up the winding path until the trees opened, revealing a wide expanse of sky that seemed impossibly close. The overlook stretched toward the horizon, where the ocean met the clouds in soft watercolor layers. A local photographer stood nearby with a tripod, adjusting the lens as he waited. Rowan spoke quietly to him, then returned to me. "This is Finn. He knows the angles here better than anyone. I thought you might want to see the sky the way you used to draw it." My breath caught. He was not trying to fix anything. He was trying to return something to me, something I had not even asked for aloud. When Finn lifted the camera, Rowan asked me gently if I wanted him nearby or a few steps away. The question mattered more than the answer. "Nearby," I said. He stayed beside me as Finn began to capture the sky in delicate frames. The light hit the clouds just right, scattering soft gold across the edges. It looked like the kind of sky I used to chase before everything changed. My hand drifted to my lap where the compass lay. Without asking, Rowan crouched beside me, his gaze following the faint glimmer of the needle. "Does it look different up here?" I nodded. "It feels different." Finn finished his shots and stepped aside, leaving Rowan and me alone with the view. I tilted my head back, letting the wind thread through my hair. It had been so long since I felt small in a way that did not hurt. Rowan spoke quietly. "When you hold it high enough, it points north again." I glanced at him. "How do you know?" "I tried it earlier. I wanted to make sure I did not promise something that was not true." My heart pressed against my ribs with a warmth I had not felt in years, a warmth that felt frightening and beautiful all at once. The wind carried our breath into the open sky. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then Rowan said something that made everything inside me pause. "You deserve to see the world without having to fight for every inch of it." My throat tightened again, but this time it was not from fear or pain. It was from hope, a hope I thought had outgrown me long ago. The afternoon passed slowly, gently, as if time itself had softened around us. When we finally headed back down the ridge, the world looked different, lighter, as if someone had shifted the sky a little closer so I would not have to reach so far. When Rowan pulled up in front of my building, he walked around to help me out, but waited for a nod before touching the chair. He learned quickly. That mattered too. Before he stepped back, he looked at me with thoughtful restraint. "If today felt like too much or too little, you can tell me." I let out a breath that felt full of places I had once closed off. Today felt like something I did not know I needed. A slow smile lifted the edge of his mouth. "Then I am glad we found it." As I rolled toward the entrance, I glanced back once. Rowan stood by his car with his hands in his pockets, watching to make sure I got inside safely. Not possessively, not anxiously, just present. The kind of presence that made the world feel possible again. The morning after Beacon Ridge felt strangely bright, as if the sky had been polished overnight. I woke with the memory of wind brushing my hair and Rowan's voice telling me I deserved to see the world without fighting for every inch. Those words still echoed softly inside my chest, warm and unsettling. I moved through my morning routine slower than usual, savoring the quiet. Even the familiar creak of my wheels on the floor sounded different, lighter. I thought Rowan might text, or call, or send another simple message the way he always did, measured and gentle, giving me space to choose. I waited through breakfast, then through my morning tea. Nothing. By noon, a small, uncomfortable knot began to form in my stomach. This was not the anxious spiraling of insecurity. It was a subtle shift, like a shadow stretching unexpectedly across sunlight. I told myself he was busy. A man like him always would be. I tried sketching the sky from yesterday, but my hand kept pausing mid-line. It was frustrating the way my thoughts drifted toward him, even when I tried anchoring them elsewhere. By mid-afternoon, I decided to walk the coastal path, hoping the ocean breeze might settle me. But as I reached the old cedar boardwalk, I saw something on the bench where Rowan had knelt beside me the night before. A scarf. His scarf. Folded neatly, placed with deliberate care. The fabric was unmistakably his. The dark charcoal color. The faint scent of cedar and bergamot woven into its fibers. My breath caught. I picked it up slowly, the familiar softness brushing against my fingertips. No note. No explanation. Just absence disguised as an object. The knot in my stomach tightened until it became something sharp. My mind scrambled for logical reasons. Maybe he had dropped it by accident. Maybe he meant to come back. Maybe he was nearby. But the longer I sat there on that cold wooden bench, the more the truth settled in, quiet and devastating. He left it for me. And he left. The realization sank into me like a weight I had carried before, a weight I recognized too well. I closed my eyes as a wave of old grief rose without permission. This was how it always happened. People offered presents until it felt too close, too real, too heavy. And then they disappeared before the world asked anything more of them. I clutched the scarf tighter, pressing it to my chest as I breathed in its familiar scent. Something inside me cracked at the edges. I should have known, I whispered to myself, barely audible over the sound of the waves. I tried to swallow the ache, but it only settled deeper. There was no anger, only that quiet echo of abandonment I thought I had buried. The ocean kept moving indifferent to my unraveling. I returned to my room with the scarf draped across my lap, like a memory that refused to fade. Hours passed. Evening deepened, streetlights flickered on. Rowan did not come, did not text, did not explain. I told myself not to care, not to let this undo the small progress I had made. But healing is not linear. And disappointment is a door that remembers how to open even when you think you've nailed it shut. When night finally wrapped around the town, my phone lit up, not from Rowan, from a news alert. Hale Industries faces critical financial crisis after overnight market shift. CEO Rowan Hale returns to Seattle for emergency intervention. I stared at the headline, my throat tightening. So that was the reason. A crisis, a catastrophe, a responsibility too large to ignore. Yet even knowing that the pain did not ease, because he still left without a word, without a goodbye, without giving me even one moment to understand. Logic could not soften emotional truth. He disappeared, just like the others, just like before. I looked down at the scarf again, the fabric blurred through the tears I refused to acknowledge. I gripped it tighter until my knuckles burned. I told myself this was foolish. He owed me nothing. We were two strangers who collided for a handful of days, but connection does not measure itself in time. It measures itself in impact. And he had moved something in me I thought was untouchable. That was what made the silence feel heavier. I wheeled toward the window and looked out over the darkened marina where the fairy lights blinked faintly across the water. Somewhere across that same water, Rowan was likely walking into boardrooms filled with chaos carrying burdens he did not talk about. And yet the only thing I could think of was the way his eyes softened when he looked at me, the steadiness of his hands on my wheel, the gentleness of his voice when he told me I deserved the sky. All of it felt impossibly far away now. My chest ached with a tired, familiar truth. People leave Alara. They always leave. My voice trembled inside the empty room, brittle and raw. I pressed the scarf to my forehead, then to my heart, as if the warmth trapped in its threads might fill the sudden cold inside me. It did not. The room remained quiet, too quiet, the kind of quiet that swallows rather than soothes. I lowered my head and let my hair fall forward, letting the shadows hide the tears. I finally stopped fighting. I had been right about one thing. Hope is dangerous, especially when it comes in the shape of a man who learned how to disappear before he learned how to stay. Rowan did not sleep the entire flight back to Seattle. Not because he was strategizing or preparing for the financial disaster waiting for him, but because every time he closed his eyes, he saw the look on my face from the night before. He had left before dawn, moving silently, so he would not have to say goodbye. He told himself it was necessary, that the crisis demanded immediate action, that he had no choice. But deep down, he knew that was only part of the truth. The larger part was fear. Fear of proximity. Fear of feeling something he had not felt in years. Fear that the warmth he had discovered beside me would ask him to stay long enough to face the loneliness he kept buried under the armor of leadership. When the plane touched down, he stepped out into a cold gray morning layered in rain. The city skyline rose like a wall of steel and glass, familiar and unforgiving. His driver rushed him straight to the Hale Industries headquarters, where reporters swarmed the entrance like a restless tide. The moment he stepped out of the car, cameras flashed, voices shouted, microphones angled toward him. Mr. Hale, is it true you abandoned the company during a crisis? Can the firm survive the projected losses? What is your recovery plan? He ignored every question, his expression carved into the stoic mask he had perfected over years of being the man everyone depended on. Inside the building, chaos pulsed through every floor. Departments scrambled. Phones rang non-stop. Executives argued. Meetings overlapped. Rowan walked through the storm of noise with a posture so controlled it looked almost unnatural, as if holding himself together required physical force. But the more he listened to reports, projections, and frantic explanations, the sharper the ache in his chest grew. It felt like a bruise pressed too hard. His assistant Mara approached him with a stack of documents, her voice tight with worry. You left abruptly. The board is furious. They think you are losing focus. Rowan took the papers silently. Mara hesitated, lowering her voice. You were not on any scheduled business trip. Where were you? He almost said it. With someone who reminded me I am human. Instead, He gave the answer that felt safest. Away, preparing. She studied him for a moment. You look tired. He nodded once. I am. But fatigue was not the truth. The truth was that he felt hollow, as if he had left something essential on the island, something he was terrified to acknowledge because acknowledging it meant admitting he wanted to go back. For the next 48 hours, he moved through meetings, drafted emergency plans, mediated investor conflicts, and made decisions with the precision of a man trained to survive corporate wars. But in every pause, every late night in his office, every moment when the building fell quiet, the image returned. Me clutching his scarf, my eyes soft but unsure, the way my breath hitched when the wind rushed over Beacon Ridge. The tremble in my voice when I said today felt like something I did not know I needed. He played those memories like a loop he could not escape, each one pressing against the walls he had spent years constructing. On the third night, he stood alone in his penthouse apartment overlooking the city. The lights below flickered like distant fireflies, but none of it felt alive to him. He poured a glass of water, took a long drink, and set it down with more force than he intended. His reflection in the window stared back exhausted and uncertain. He rubbed a hand over his face. What am I doing? He had built his life on control, on structure, on responsibility. He had convinced himself that closeness was a liability he could not afford. That vulnerability made him weak. That attachment led only to loss. But then there was me, the woman who asked him to lift her to see the sky. The woman who had looked at him not with expectation or calculation, but with quiet truth. The woman who reminded him what it felt like to breathe in a world that was not built on pressure. He closed his eyes, remembering the moment I almost fell, the sound of my breath breaking, the fear that surged through him at the thought of me getting hurt. He had not felt that kind of fear since his father's collapse years ago, a loss that carved permanent fault lines through him. Leaving the island felt like preventing another fault line from forming. But all he had done was create a different type of fracture, one inside himself. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the small object he had carried since the moment he boarded the ferry back to the mainland. The compass. My compass. I had left it on the overlook without realizing. He held it in his palm, turning it slowly. The needle spun once before pointing north with quiet certainty. He exhaled. The truth settled heavily in his chest. He had not left because of the crisis. He had left because staying terrified him more than any financial disaster. Staying meant holding space for someone. Staying meant risking loss. Staying meant being seen. And yet the emptiness inside him now was worse than fear. It was the echo of something he wanted but ran from. Mara knocked lightly on his door. Rowan. The board wants to see you first thing tomorrow. He looked up, eyes distant. Let them wait. She blinked. Sir? He stood, the compass still in his hand. I need to go back. There are things more important than this. Mara stared stunned as he walked past her with a steadiness that looked nothing like the controlled facade he had maintained all week. This was different, lighter, more certain. For the first time in years, Rowan Hale was not running from something. He was walking toward it. I was sitting under the cedar tree at the edge of Harborview Park when the wind shifted in a way I had come to recognize. It carried the scent of sea salt and engine oil and something faintly metallic like a memory trying to return before I was ready. My sketchbook lay open on my lap, a rough constellation taking shape beneath my pencil. I had been here every afternoon since he left. Not because I thought he would come back. Not because I hoped for anything. But because the sky over this park made silence feel less heavy. I dipped the pencil again, tracing a slow arc where a star should have been. My hand hesitated. It always hesitated now. Absence had weight, and I felt it each time the page stayed empty longer than it should. A child's laughter floated from the swings nearby. A dog barked in the distance. The world moved, healed, righted itself. Mine had not yet. I took a breath and looked up at the line where the water met the horizon. It shimmered faintly. A fairy horn sounded in the distance, low and familiar. My heart twisted once. Just muscle memory, I told myself. Nothing more. Then a shadow fell across my sketchbook. Not intrusive, not looming, just present. I knew the shape of that stillness before I lifted my head. Rowan stood in front of me, hands at his sides, posture unguarded for the first time since the day I met him. He looked different, not in the way of a man who had traveled, but of a man who had been stripped of something and had chosen not to hide the rawness that remained. His coat was dusted with salt from the wind. His eyes were tired but clear. He did not speak. Neither did I. The breeze shifted again, tugging gently at his hair, as if trying to prove he was real. He crouched down slowly until he was at my eye level. No apology came, no explanation, no grand gesture. Instead, he reached into his coat and pulled out a small wooden box. He set it carefully on my sketchbook as if placing something fragile onto something sacred. I stared at it without touching it. My voice came out quieter than I intended. "You came back." He exhaled like he had been holding that breath for days. Yes. A single word. Heavy, honest. He nodded toward the box. "Open it." My fingers trembled as I loosened the clasp. Inside were tiny wooden constellations carved by hand, imperfect, edges uneven, some stars slightly misshapen, but each one held a name burned into its surface. Vega, Altair, Polaris, Lyra, and near the bottom in smaller letters, one I had not seen in a long time. North. I brushed my thumb over the carvings. "These aren't bought. No." His voice was low. "I made them." "Why?" The word escaped before I could soften it. He shifted his weight, looking momentarily unsure, like a man trying to walk in a world whose gravity he had just discovered. Because I did not know how to come back empty-handed. Because I could not return with promises I might not keep. Because you deserve something real. He paused. Something made with hands that are trying. The wind stilled. My heartbeat did not. Rowan looked at me with a steadiness that made my breath falter. When I left, I thought I was protecting both of us. I thought staying would only hurt you more. I thought I was too broken to offer anything except disappointment. His eyes tightened as if saying the next words cost something. But the truth is, leaving hurt more. A lot more. And not seeing your face for a week felt like losing the sky all over again. My throat closed lightly as if grief and relief had collided within it. Rowan reached out but stopped just before touching my hand, always waiting for my consent. "May I?" I nodded. His fingers settled gently over mine, grounding warm. I lifted my eyes to his. "You disappeared without a word." "I know. You left me with your scarf." "I know. You didn't even look back." He swallowed. "I know. Then why come back now?" Rowan leaned forward slightly, just enough that I could see the exhaustion behind his eyes transform into something unmistakably earnest. "Because I finally realized something." He inhaled deeply. "I cannot fix your past. I cannot fill the spaces life took from you. I cannot promise I will never fail." His voice softened even more. "But I can choose not to leave your present." My chest tightened. That sentence hit harder than any apology could have. I looked down at the constellation pieces again. None of them were perfect. None of them were symmetrical. All of them were real. Slowly, I placed my hand over his. His thumb trembled once beneath mine. "You do not owe me anything, Rowan. I am not asking for heroics. I am not asking for vows or labels or guarantees. I am just asking for presence. That is all I have ever wanted." He closed his eyes briefly, and when he opened them again, something unarmored flickered there. "Then, presence is what I am offering. Nothing more. Nothing less." I felt something inside me uncoil. Something that had been clenched since the accident. Since loss. Since he left. I nodded once, small, quiet. "Enough!" Rowan exhaled a breath that sounded like a man stepping out of a burning building into fresh air. "Thank you." A soft laugh escaped me, weak but real. "We are not fixed, Rowan." "No, we are not broken either." The wind rustled through the cedar branches above us. For the first time since he left, I lifted my face fully to the sky. And for the first time since I met him, Rowan looked up with me. Neither of us needed to say what was already beginning again. 1 week later, I found myself rolling along a quiet coastal street in the early evening, guided only by Rowan's message, which had been brief and strangely gentle. Meet me at the old cafe by the water. Ruth, come only if you feel ready. I had stared at the text for 10 minutes, wondering what ready meant anymore. Ready to forgive, ready to trust, ready to look at the sky again without flinching. Now, as I approached the cafe, the windows glowed warm and the scent of roasted coffee drifted into the salt air. A new ramp had been installed along the side of the building, smooth, polished wood that looked freshly sanded. I hesitated. Rowan had done this. For me, but also for anyone who might come after me. That detail mattered in ways I could not yet explain. When I reached the top of the ramp, the back door pushed open with surprising ease and soft light spilled into the hallway. Near the stairs, a vertical lift weighted a simple metal platform with guardrails and a hand crank. A handwritten note was taped to it. It works. I tested it 100 times. Promise it will not drop you, if you trust it enough to try. My stomach fluttered, but I wheeled on anyway, feeling the platform shift just slightly beneath my weight. I took a breath, then another, and lifted the latch. The platform rose slowly, creaking a little, moving with a steadiness that felt almost human in its effort. When the roof came into view, I exhaled shakily like someone surfacing after being underwater too long. The wooden planks were strung with soft amber lights and a low railing framed the edge. The ocean stretched out in a sweeping arc, the waves brushing the shoreline like a whispered reminder that the world had rhythm even when I did not. Rowan stood near the far corner, setting up a small machine on a tripod. He turned when he heard the lift click into place. The look on his face was not dramatic or scripted or triumphant. It was relief. Honest and quiet. You made it. His voice cracked slightly, like he had not expected me to come and had hoped too hard anyway. I rolled toward him slowly. What is all this? He nodded toward the machine and the blank slanted section of wall behind it. Something you once told me stuck with me, about how the sky used to be yours, before everything changed. I felt the familiar weight press against my ribs, but for once it did not crush. It only settled. Rowan looked down briefly as if gathering words carefully. You lost so much in one moment that it felt unfair to even call it a moment. And I cannot give you back what went before, but I can give you this. He pressed a button and the projector hummed to life. A wash of blue light flooded the wall, then burst into swirling shapes that were not scientific at all. Not precise. Not mathematically correct. They were brush strokes shading smudged stars in perfect glowing clusters that pulsed with uneven beauty. My constellations. Not the ones from textbooks. The ones I had drawn when I was 15, dreaming of the sky before I ever imagined losing the ability to stand beneath it. He had digitized them. Every line, every flaw, every place where my pencil had trembled. My throat tightened. Rowan stepped closer, but not too close. You once said they were only feelings, so I made them something you could see again, something the world could not take from you. I lifted my hand to my mouth, not to hide a cry, but to hold the weight of the moment inside me. The stars danced across the wooden surface, shifting slowly like a living memory. Rowan knelt beside me, not in reverence or apology, but simply to be level with me. I reached into my pocket and took out my mother's compass. I had carried it through every storm, even when I did not know where north was anymore. He watched as I lifted it and tilted its face toward the night sky. The needle steadied, pointing straight and unwavering. It points north again, I whispered. Maybe it always did. Maybe I just needed to look up long enough to see it. Rowan let out a breath that sounded like hope, easing into a body that had forgotten what hope felt like. He placed his hand gently on mine, careful, asking without words if this was allowed. I let my fingers curve around his. The warmth between our palms was not sudden or overwhelming. It was steady, like something that had taken its time arriving and now had no intention of leaving. Rowan looked at me with a softness that did not ask for anything. If you ever want someone to look at the sky with you, I am here. Not a promise, not a declaration, just presence. The one thing I had always needed but never known how to ask for. I leaned my head slightly toward him, not into him, but toward him. The distance between us became choice instead of fear. The projector shifted and a cluster of stars brightened overhead. My mother used to say that the sky was only beautiful because we cannot hold it, I murmured. Rowan smiled faintly. I think she forgot to mention that we can share it. The lights swayed gently above us as the evening deepened and the wind curled around the rooftop carrying the scent of the sea. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Neither of us needed to. The sky had always been too big for me to reach. Tonight it felt close enough to touch. And Rowan stayed beside me, not fixing, not saving, just staying long enough for the compass in my hand to remember its direction and for my heart to learn how to rise again. When you reached the end of this story, if even a single moment made you pause, breathe deeper, or feel something stir inside your chest, then I hope you will stay here with us a little longer, because stories like this are not just entertainment. They are reminders that healing is still possible no matter how many storms we have survived. Ilara's journey is not really about wheelchairs or rooftops or constellations carved from wood. It is about something far quieter and much rarer in this world. The courage to let someone stay after life has taught you again and again that people leave. If her resilience touched you, if Rowan's return softened a place in you that you did not expect, then you already understand the kind of stories we tell here. This channel is not about perfect people or perfect endings. It is about second chances, slow healing, late tenderness. The kind of love that arrives not with fireworks but with presence, patience, and small acts of grace. And if watching Ilara lift her compass toward the sky made you feel your own sense of direction return even for a moment, then you belong here with us. Because somewhere inside each of us is a version of her, someone who has lost something, someone who has rebuilt themselves piece by piece. Someone who has waited a long time for a person who chooses to stay without needing to fix or rescue someone who hopes for a little light even on the days when the sky is hard to see. If this story helped you remember that you too deserve to be seen and not just looked at, heard, and not just spoken to, cherished, and not just tolerated, then I want to invite you to be part of this community of hearts that are learning slowly but bravely how to rise again. Here we honor the beauty of imperfection. We honor broken things that heal crooked but stronger. We honor the quiet bravery of showing up when it would be easier to shut down. We honor moments like Rowan kneeling beside Ilara, not promising miracles, only offering presence. Because presence is the rarest form of love we have left in this busy world, and it is the one thing we need most. So if this story made you feel less alone, if it reminded you of someone you lost, or someone you wish would come back, or someone you never thought would show up, but did, then I ask you to subscribe, not for algorithms, not for numbers, but because stories like this become deeper, richer, more powerful when you come back to hear them with us. And if you felt a tug in your chest when Ilara whispered it, points north again, then maybe your compass is finding direction too. Maybe the sky above you tonight looks a little brighter. Maybe you understand now that you do not have to walk or stand or climb to reach hope. Sometimes hope comes down to meet you where you are. So stay. Stay for the next story. Stay for the next moment of healing. Stay for the reminder that there is still kindness in this world at a time when many believe it is gone. And if you want to help keep these stories alive, to help them find the people who need them most, then tap the like button, share this with someone who might need a soft place to land, and subscribe so you never miss the next tale that could shift something quietly inside you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And tonight, when you look at the sky, I hope you remember this simple truth. The stars do not shine because they are flawless. They shine because they keep trying, just like you.